Ron Howard's story is more than just movies. It's about staying alive, being strong, and the calm storm of life that makes greatness. We've all heard of him. For some, it's a boy with red hair from the Andy Griffith Show. The good Opie is the son we all wish we had. Richie Cunningham from Happy Days is a symbol of innocence for certain people. He lived in a time when the world seemed simpler. But Ron is much more than that. He is a brilliant director who has made classic movies like Apollo 13 and A Beautiful Mind. But even the best stars can't get away from their own past. Behind the praise of celebrity is a man whose life has been full of hardships, failures, and the terrible realization that greatness can come at a price. Think about how hard it would be to grow up in the spotlight without ever having an opportunity to learn what it's like to live without it. The cameras first caught Ron when he was just a little kid. His parents were both career performers when he was born in Duncan, Oklahoma in 1954, thus they were used to the strains of the entertainment industry. When Ron was 18 months old, the world he knew was already full with studio lights, call sheets, and film sets that were always at home. His childhood wasn't full of playgrounds and soccer games. Instead, it was full of the undercurrent of a world that moved too quickly for a little boy to keep up with. In the middle of the 1800s, his family moved to California. The 1950s promised a better future, but they also put pressure on an industry that doesn't care who you are. It just cares if you fit in. Ron had already become Opie Taylor, a character on the Andy Griffith Show that everybody liked, by the time he was 6. People in the world thought of him as America's son, but Ron saw something else. Fame brought with it a sense of loneliness. His classes were often little trailers behind the studio. He tried to do his studies while the noise from the set came through. His friends were co-workers and actors, not kids he could play with. There were no games on the schoolyard, no breaks, just the hard facts of the business. As he got older, the pressure of fame started to feel more like a prison than a gift. When Ron was 13, he was stuck in a role that the world wouldn't let him out of. The sweet, innocent youngster Opie Taylor had won over America, but he became a burden. I didn't know who I was without that person. Later, he stated that the role had become so much a part of who he was that he couldn't help but say anything that showed it. Acting wasn't the only thing Ron did on his journey. It was about getting through an industry that doesn't simply let go of the past. Ron suffered the sting of Hollywood's icy judgment when his program The Monroes flopped after only 26 episodes. He scolded himself and wondered whether his time had already passed and if his career in the business had already been set. Still, he got back up. When Happy Days came out, it looked like a Sheds had finally gotten away from Opie. But even then, Hollywood thought of him as a side character. He wasn't a world-famous star, he was more interested in Fansa. Ron wouldn't let goofers dream, no matter how many doors closed or how many doubts he had. He converted his pain into desire. Instead of letting what other people thought of him define him, he did. There was a fire that kept blazing underneath every rejection and every failed idea. It pushed him ahead and fueled his passion. Ron didn't just have to become a director, he wanted to change his legacy so badly that he did it. It wasn't easy to make the change. When he first started directing movies like Night Shift and Splash in the early 1980s, the business didn't immediately accept him. They didn't believe him and made fun of his ideas, but Ron kept on. People thought Splash was a foolish fantasy, but it turned out to be a hit at the box office. This showed the world that he was more than just Opie and Richie Cunningham. His movies, such as Apollo 13 and A Beautiful Mind, became proof of his idea that Towie's capacity to turn personal difficulty into artistic success. But even though Wayne was doing well, there were times when the stress was too much to handle. With every achievement came the anxiety that everything could fall apart at any moment. And it did. EDTV did poorly at the box office in 1999. A devastating blow to Ron's job. It was the first time he doubted everything about what made him successful as a filmmaker. But that setback didn't stop him. It made him have to remake himself, work more, and learn more about his craft. It wasn't simply about making movies anymore. It was about showing that he could do more. That his narrative wasn't over yet. There were times when he was sure of himself and times when he wasn't. He started Imagine Entertainment, a company that will transform the way movies and TV shows are made. But there were costs to that too. The stress of managing so many projects took its toll, and the terror offer never really went away. And then there was Solo, a Star Wars story, a movie that appeared like it would do well but ended up being a public failure. The criticism was quick and harsh. Ron wondered for the first time in his career if the industry still wanted him and if he had anything else to give. But after the storm, in the quiet moments, he found something amazing. He found the strength to keep going. Ron's story shows how strong the human spirit is, even when things go wrong, people die, and doubts creep in. He never gave up. And when his most recent movie, Meat, didn't do well at the box office, it was another reminder that the route to greatness is never easy. Ron has realized, though, that being great isn't about getting praise, making money, or getting awards. It's about having the guts to keep sharing stories even after people stop clapping. The things that Ron Howard did well don't make up his legacy. It's based on the quiet times of perseverance and the strength to get back up every time life knocks him down. It's about accepting the storms, finding purpose in the fight, and showing that you can always get back up no matter how many times you fall. Ron Howard is more than simply a famous person in Hollywood on that path. He stands for what it really means to last. For Ron Howard, being great didn't mean staying out of trouble. It was about going through them. Even though the world felt he wouldn't make it after going through public skepticism and financial trouble, an old wound opened up again, one that had been there long before Hollywood ever respected him. It wasn't about competition or betrayal, it was about the chilly machinery of celebrity and the unsaid parallels to Henry Winkler. When Happy Days started in 1974, Ron was at heart. At 19, he was the solid son of America. Third-haired, kind man who everyone liked. But all changed in 1975 when Fonzie came around. Henry Winkler, with his leather jacket and captivating charm, stole the show. Henry got a lot of fan mail all of a sudden. Posters sold out quickly. Magazines want him on their covers. And Ron, who was just old enough to vote, was left feeling like he had lost his footing. Oh, hold on. In 1976, our reporter even asked him, "How does it feel to be second place on your own show?" Ron never stopped smiling, but inside he felt like he had just been punched too late. But this is the fact that people have been getting wrong for years. Ron was never in agony because of Henry. Henry never asked for more or pushed Ron away. He was gentle, humble, and generous. The pain comes from the system, the studios, and the way Famer builds a young man's identity. Ron said years after that he felt insulted without permission. Not by Henry, but by business. That was the wound that stayed with him. It wasn't losing the spotlight. It was being replaced in his own story. It dug deep, stayed for a long time, and came back when he least expected it. The magical falsehoods were in both ears. While the world whispered about competition, Ron and Henry established something that media loyalty couldn't change. Henry didn't merely stand next to Ron on set. He stood by him off to the side. 2. He became the godfather of all 4 of Ron's kids. Henry never flinched when Ron went from acting to directing. Has been there for him every step of the way. Henry was crying backstage when Ron received the Academy Award for A Beautiful Mind in 2002. "He deserved every bit of this," he said softly. At that moment, when Ron stepped into the spotlight, he knew that the remaining bits of that old wound had finally healed. Their relationship wasn't based on competitiveness. It was just about staying alive. It was about 2 young men going through the storm of fame, which is always changing. Picking grace over pride, loyalty over fear, and the truth over gossip. Anyone who has ever felt like they were in the background or not important will comprehend this lesson. The world may pick a favorite, but the heart picks its family. But Ron's narrative isn't only about being famous. It's about the difficulty of fighting with yourself. Behind all of it, Ron was crying with pride. They were broken, yet they were still holding awards. A man discovered that you can go through even the worst storms if you have someone by your side. Ron and Cheryl's marriage lasted more than 50 years and was flawless. Time, distance, and the stress of Hollywood all put it to the test. When they first moved into their small apartment in Los Angeles and were having a hard time, love was what kept them going. It smelled like toast that had been burned. Cheryl's notebooks with pen stains and the happiness of two dreamers starting a family when their kids came. Bryce was born in 1981, the twins were born in 1985, and Reed was born in 1987. But even the strongest beams can be tested by life. Ron went back home to find his daughter after filming Far on Away in Ireland. The stranger who had just walked in made him hesitate. He knew he had missed something while he was chasing his aspirations. That moment destroyed him. Even though Cheryl had been parenting their kids alone and feeling abandoned by the life they had made together, their conversations turned sharp. Their quiet is more heavy. The stress of their jobs, losing money, and the fact that the industry takes more than it offers started to break down the foundation of their relationship. But even though it hurt, they chose each other. They learned how to discuss their struggles with each other. The figures on the charts were hard to look at, but the real hurt came from the silent anxiety that they might not make it through. Cheryl would sit next to Ron and remark, "You could lose everything we own and still have him," when things were at their worst and the losses felt too much to take. And that truth was what kept them together all those years. Their love wasn't based on big gestures or precise times. It was made stronger by being strong and choosing each other when everything else seemed to be coming apart.